Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam, and we have F1 at Suzuka and NASCAR at Darlington to discuss with you guys today. First off though, Sam, how are you doing and how did you enjoy the races this weekend?
I'm doing great. I mean, we got a couple races from this past weekend to discuss, and we've got a very busy weekend next weekend. So I'm excited to get to all of it and give us a little review of last week and a preview of next week.
Yeah, we got a lot to discuss today. First off, though, F1 in Suzuka, where Max Verstappen dominated the weekend in Suzuka with a blistering pole lap and qualifying, followed by a sensational win as he held off the two McLarens the whole Grand Prix for his first win of the season. To me, that was one of, if not the best drive and weekend as a whole of Max's career. Just, you know, from the qualifying lap all the way through the entire Grand Prix, holding off both those McLarens who were always challenging him for that race lead the entire race.
Yeah, I mean, this one was really one of his masterpiece weekends, in my opinion, to come from the position that he's in, really struggling with the car. Obviously, there's been the issues with the teammates and struggles there, and it's just been a battle, really, for the last few weeks with them. I know that he's still managed some good races, managed to get on the podium and whatnot, but to come out and win a race like this, I mean, that qualifying lap especially was really one of his all-time best, right up there with the Monaco lap where he stole pole from Alonso and, you know, almost, obviously, he didn't complete this lap, but that Saudi Arabia lap where he almost took the pole from Hamilton, that, you know, these masterpiece performances from him. Obviously, he didn't finish off the Saudi one, but this one he did, and it was just really a work of art all the way around.
Yeah, that's why I think this is the best, I would say, weekend as a whole of his career, just because of what he was able to do in qualifying and then, you know, moving it over to the Grand Prix. If you look at, I'd say Brazil last year was the best race of his career and probably the most important, other than Abu Dhabi 2021, just in terms of the championship and everything surrounding it, and just what he was able to do in Brazil last year, coming from all the way back in the rain to overtake and, you know, so many guys, and then to eventually pass Lando and win that race by a very large margin, kind of wrapped up his championship last year. But this one, you know, you have to include the qualifying lap as well because of how hard it was to pass during the race on Sunday, and just how he was able to put that lap together with a car that is, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not like a 8th or 9th place car on the grid, but it's certainly not up there with where the McLarens are. So yeah, I just think if you go from all the way from the beginning of the weekend, kind of piecing it together slowly and getting that car in the right position to lay down that lap in qualifying, and then what he was able to do throughout the entire race, fending off those McLarens, I think it has to be up there as one of, if not the best weekend as a whole, if you count really Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first thought, was the Brazil weekend. I don't think anything is ever going to top that for me, or at least it's going to be very hard to, but I would say that this was right there next to it, that next tier down, sort of like a 1B to 1A situation where, you know, this one was pretty much nearly as perfect. It just, you know, seeing that many spots made up in a race is a little bit different than a qualifying lap, you know, which the centerpiece of this performance was the qualifying lap. Obviously, he was fantastic during the race to hold off the McLarens, who I think we all thought had more pace, but yeah, I mean, the centerpiece of this one was a qualifying lap, which was beautiful on its own right and puts him up there as one of the best performances of his career.
Yeah, and I would have to say it's, I think, definitely the best qualifying lap of his career. I mean, that Monaco one is close, and the Saudi one, like you mentioned, is up there as well. If he would have finished that one off, I think that one would have been the best. But this one, just given, you know, where his teammate was in qualifying, didn't even make it into Q3, and you know, there's a whole separate set of issues with that second Red Bull car right now. But to make it up there with where his teammate was, and then to beat out the McLarens, which seemed like, you know, by far the fastest car, and they have been so far this year. So yeah, it was an incredible lap, and it's really hard to even kind of quantify where he's at right now after this weekend, because it just seems like he's completely unstoppable. I mean, there's definitely going to be weeks that he doesn't win this year just because of where that car is at compared to the two McLarens, but this weekend has given me no doubt, and I had really no doubt before, but especially when you see weekends like this, you're really reminded that he is greater than anyone in the series right now, and I don't think it's particularly close at this point.
Yeah, I'm still pretty confident in my McLaren, and the McLaren one especially, because Red Bull's not really putting up a challenge with that second seat, but even Lando Norris to win the title, I'm still pretty confident in that prediction, but I think a lot of that just comes from having a lot more faith in the McLaren car week to week, and Red Bull there could be weekends where Max is incredible and he finishes 5th or 6th, and that's just all he can get out of the car, unfortunately. But if he were to pull this off, or even to take this down to the last couple races and really give Norris or Piastri or whoever up there a challenge title, a challenge for the title. Sorry, I think it would be one of his best performances year long. I think it would be up there with almost any of his title runs for me.
Yeah, I think it would be definitely up there with last year. Definitely up there with Abu Dhabi 2021, or the season in 2021. Abu Dhabi being the championship race, the one that decided it. But yeah, I think it was this weekend as a whole, just, he's kind of just reminding us who he is. And also not just this weekend. If you look at the entire season, he has a 4th place, a 2nd place, and a 1st now. So he's not exactly, sitting back in 6th, 7th, 8th, like where we've seen some of these other guys, hinting at the Ferraris there. But I think it's just proof that he just continues to remind us what level he is on right now. And it's really hard for me to even put into words just what we're witnessing because how much better, he is compared to what we've seen from the other guys. And that's not to diminish, guys like Lando, guys like Oscar, guys like Charles, Lewis, Fernando. I mean, there's a lot of very good drivers out there, but it's just he's on such a different level right now that it's hard to really quantify that and put it into words.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that he doesn't get the best car to pair it with, but I think at the same time, too, I think it makes it a lot more entertaining for us as fans to see him in 2nd, 3rd, maybe even 4th best car, depending on the weekend, and that really sort of levels the playing field almost, and we can get some exciting battles. I know that this wasn't the most exciting race per se, but in qualifying we get some great battles, and then track dependent maybe I think we can get some fantastic races as well.
Yeah, I think that is what's kind of setting up this championship to be so great is he's only 1 point behind, and he is probably 3rd fastest car on average. It's really hard to qualify where that car is at in the field because of how the second seat has been so far. And just, is that car only drivable by Max, or is he just really outperforming what the car? I mean, if he's, taking that car, if that car is where it has been for the second drivers, if that's how it would be for the majority of the grid, and this is where he's putting that car, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been like a greater display than what we've seen so far this year. If that's the case, I don't think that's quite the case. I think it's probably on average like a 3rd or 4th fastest car, like you said. So yeah, it's crazy that he is still in this championship fight. With that being said, and how the McLarens have kind of a 2-car advantage going into every weekend ahead of him to fight off that championship bid.
Yeah, I mean, I know Tsunoda has a few points, but if you look at just when the guys have been in the second seat of that Red Bull, they have 0 points combined, and Max is, like you mentioned, 1 point off the title, and that's just an unbelievable disparity. And I think that we did see some promising signs from Tsunoda, even if it wasn't a perfect weekend. I think that he'll grow into that car and they'll get some better results. But I think this disparity come the end of the year, even if Tsunoda does improve, will be one of the greatest we've ever seen. And I think it's going to only establish, even if we don't think of Law as elite drivers in an F1 sense, I think this will only go further to establish Max's legacy and how he looks compared to a lot of the other drivers in the field, that it's really not a competition.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Lawsons and the Yukis aren't like what Hamiltons or Leclerc's or Norris's or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they're also not like Latifis and Sargents and like you know, drivers like that back there as well. They're pretty fine drivers, and what he has been able to do so far, outscoring them 61-0, has been very incredible as well, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and you know, even with Lawson, even with how bad he was the first two races, we saw in the previous two seasons when he filled in, we saw some really solid performances from him. We know he's an F1 capable driver. Maybe it's just bad timing, bad situation there, and we obviously know Tsunoda is too. So, like you mentioned, these guys are maybe not championship quality, but they're solid F1 drivers, and to see the gap between Verstappen and those guys is kind of just mind-blowing when you put it in that context. Even if the car is friendly to him, it's still really not even a comparison.
Yeah, it's not even close. And I think that's one of those things that just is continuing to blow us away about Max, and another kind of notch on his record of where he is compared to the rest of the field right now. And speaking of the rest of the field, I think we have to talk about these McLarens and what went down this weekend, because on paper it should have been a pretty, not easy, but you know, a 1-2 weekend for them at a track that I think would suit their car pretty well. And you know, at the beginning of the weekend they seemed like the fastest car as well throughout the practices. So I think it's, you know, did McLaren blow an opportunity this weekend at a 1-2 and to really maximize those points? And should McLaren have, there's a lot of talk about if McLaren should have switched the drivers out when they were hunting down Max there and given Oscar a go at Verstappen instead of having Lando back there, you know, taking the fight to him. So I think those are the two big question marks for McLaren coming from the...
Yeah, I think this could be the storyline of the season, really, if this keeps compounding, is if McLaren keeps making these mistakes, do they have enough pace in the car to overcome these mistakes? I know that sometimes, you know, this was just a generational weekend from Verstappen, and sometimes it's tough to overcome that, but you do have the fastest car, and like you mentioned, you know, this is their third chance, really. They could have gone 1-2 in all three of these races so far, and they've only managed to do it once.
Yeah.
The Australia one, I gave them a little bit of a pass for with the Piastri incident, just because it was such a wild weather race and a first race of the year and all that, I guess. But this one, you know, again, you get a little bit of a pass for Verstappen, but if you keep on compounding these week to week, you're going to let these other teams stay in this championship, and you never know. Maybe Mercedes finds an upgrade that makes them the fastest car. They're hanging around a little bit, at least in the team championship, and maybe there's a world where Red Bull finds an upgrade, Max finds another gear, even on what he's done so far this year, and all of a sudden we're looking at not really a big threat in the constructors, but in the drivers we're looking at a real challenge for Norris and Piastri in a year where really this should be theirs to lose. So, yeah, I think if this continues, we saw a lot of this last year where they could have won both championships and squandered a bunch of opportunities. I think this year they have a little more room for error, but we're going to see how this plays out. We could, by summer break, this could feel pretty much over if they can go lights out here for a little while and lock in, or it could be wide open, and I'm excited to see kind of where that ends up.
Yeah, I think this is the storyline of the year, like you mentioned, how they handle this battle between Norris and Piastri. You know, not only hurting themselves from a point standpoint for their team, but also for their drivers, and kind of figuring out who they're going to favor, because at the end of the day, you have to make the decision for one of them to favor for the championship, and how they make that decision, I think, is going to be the biggest thing going forward. But for McLaren right now, they're 111 points. Mercedes is second closest at 75, then Red Bull at 61, all Max Verstappen, and then Ferrari at 35 points. So those are really the teams that have the opportunity to win a championship this year from a constructor's point of view. And right now, I just don't see any of those teams making the leap to challenge McLaren for that constructors championship. I think there's guys within those teams that can challenge for the drivers, like Max, maybe even Russell if he turns it on. enough, and if the Ferraris can improve, I think one of those guys could make a run. They're pretty far behind right now, given their slow start. So yeah, I think it's McLaren is in a good place from the constructors, just because of how dominant their car has been so far, and what we've seen, kind of a lack of performance from their biggest title rivals, Ferrari just getting off to a slow start and Red Bull getting nothing from the second car. So unless something big changes there, I think McLaren is in for another constructors title this year, just based on that fact alone. But a lot of things can change, and these teams can make very big improvements, like we saw from McLaren last year throughout the season, to take that spot from from the team up top. But for this weekend alone, I think it was a missed opportunity for McLaren to maximize their points and get a 1-2, or even have one of their two drivers win, just by not doing something different strategy-wise than what Verstappen did. The whole, I guess, like strength and what you have going for you when you have two drivers up there fighting one driver is that you can split up those strategies and make it hard for Red Bull to cover both of those guys at the same time. And we really didn't see that. There was one pit and Oscar pit one lap before Lando. I mean, I think if you wanted to give one of your drivers a good chance of winning this race, the best way to go about it would be to split up those pit strategies, especially when you look at the fact that it was incredibly difficult to pass out there all day. There wasn't really any at all. So I think that was their big miss this weekend, and not so much the non-swapping of the drivers, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was an opportunity there. I would have loved to have seen what Piastri could have done, but I don't think either guy really catches Max for sure. To catch Max for sure here, I think that would have been a tough ask, just with the way he drove this weekend. I mean, holding Norris off as long as he did was impressive enough, and then I think he would have been able to manage the same with Piastri, but I think it would have been exciting to see McLaren give him that opportunity, and I think it's too early for them to be favoring Norris that much in a driver's championship perspective. I think we talked about earlier letting them go until kind of summer break and then making a decision, and I think that's where they should be at, and not favoring Norris potentially so early here.
Yeah, I think it was the right call from McLaren to not swap the drivers, and that's just because, like you said, it's really early in the season to make a call for who you want to favor in the drivers' championship. And also, if Oscar, a lot of people were saying they should have swapped so that Oscar could have a go at Max, and I get that, but if Oscar really aced, I think he would have been able to pass Lando and go for it that way from a real natural racing perspective, because the team never told them that they couldn't go after each other and race. They never told them to hold position. They said that was Lando's pace, what he had, but they never told Oscar that he couldn't try and overtake and make that move. They told him that they weren't going to swap him out, but they didn't tell them that he couldn't, go for it on his own. So he had every opportunity to make that happen. At the end of the day, he didn't, A, because it's a very hard track to pass on, but B, I just think those two guys have such similar pace and they're in the same car that it's going to be hard for Oscar to make that pass in the first place, just given that fact. So I think it was the right call from McLaren. Maybe Oscar is able to mount a better challenge, but I don't really think he is. I think Lando and Oscar were pretty par for par on pace this entire weekend, and I don't think swapping the drivers would have changed that. And I don't think it was favoritism to Lando either for them, telling them not to swap. I think it was just saying, you guys figure it out on track and race it out. We're not going to tell you can't, but we're also not going to tell you, that you have to stay here either.
Yeah, and I think them being par for par on pace makes things really interesting going forward, because I think most of this year they have been really tight on qualifying pace and on race pace, and I think that's going to make things really exciting here, not having a championship where one driver is massively favored like we've seen with Red Bull over the obviously obviously we saw that with Mercedes a lot as well in the Hamilton era, that sometimes they would favor him because he gave them the best chance to win a driver's title. I think that with them potentially having plenty of cushion in the constructors battle, that's going to leave them some room to let these guys battle maybe longer in the drivers championship. And I hope that they do, because I think these guys would be it would make for a fascinating title fight between these two, and see how that teammate dynamic develops over the year, with them seemingly being on pretty good terms at the moment, but we know how quickly that can change in F1.
Yeah, well, this position, it's not Hamilton to Bottas or Verstappen to Perez or whatever. If that's the case and you have Verstappen behind Perez or you have Hamilton behind Bottas, you let those guys through and let them challenge, because you know deep down that they have that pace advantage over their teammate that's going to let them have a shot at winning that race. Whereas Norris and Piastri, I think they're very similar in what their capabilities are right now. And we've seen that really all year just based on pace. The first race of the year, Oscar was right there behind Lando the whole race until he had that off in the rain. And then the second race, Lando was right behind Oscar pretty much on pace until the end when he had those brake issues that had him finish a little farther behind than what the most of the race would say. So I think it's just a different position than what we've seen in the past from some of these top teams, where it's one main driver and a second driver who's much farther off. So, while probably since Hamilton and Rosberg, we haven't seen a situation like this. So, I think it's the right decision to let them race it out, especially this early in the year, when you have two guys that are very similar on pace and, both have an equal shot at the Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, and I think that also we could see some interesting dynamics with this just being the last year of regulations. We don't know what next year is going to look like for McLaren or for anybody else. I mean, this could be the only chance that either of these guys get to win a title. Yeah. So, there is a possibility that we see. I think these guys, personality-wise, are a little bit different than Hamilton and Rosberg. I don't know if it's going to get to that level, but we could definitely see some fireworks here coming up soon. And I think, if we get a situation again here next weekend or in the near future where Piastri maybe thinks he has more pace and they keep Lando ahead, I think that we could see some a little bit of fireworks, at least behind the scenes, coming up soon at McLaren.
Yeah, I think it's definitely probably the biggest thing to keep an eye on so far this year. And speaking of things to keep an eye on, what is up with Ferrari so far this year? It's been 3 races. You let them get through 1 or 2 races and try and figure out what they have for pace. I mean, Hamilton got the sprint win, but really other than that, this entire season, they have looked pretty significantly far behind what we expected, or at least what I expected from them coming into the season. I had them as the Constructors' Champion winner, and I had Leclerc winning a championship as well, and those two things seem very far off. So at least for me, this is not what I was expecting from them, but I also think a lot of people were maybe not expecting that much, but expecting much more than this from them so far this year, and we just haven't seen it. I mean, they had a double DSQ last week that obviously didn't help their point standings, but 2 weeks ago in China. But other than that, I mean, it just hasn't seemed like they've really been there on pace either, other than that one Hamilton pole lap in sprint and the sprint win.
Yeah, and I think, that Hamilton performance in China looks even more impressive the further we get along from it. I know it's only been 1 race weekend, but that's been 3 feature races in a row where Ferrari has not brought their best stuff. So that sprint weekend looks even better and better for them in hindsight. But I think that we all saw better for Ferrari coming this year. Maybe it was just this new driver lineup. It did seem like they were making some progress, though, the last year or two, maybe with some of their organizational issues that they've had. But it still seems like some of those are bubbling up again, and some miscommunication between the drivers and the team, and then we also have some car issues as well. It seems kind of lacking on pace. I think that they'll get it figured out a little bit, but even I wasn't as high as them as you. I wasn't as high on them as you were, but I still had them second, and I think pretty much everybody had them 1 or 2 going into the year, and now they're sitting in fourth, seem to pretty firmly be the fourth best team. Again, it's kind of tough to judge that given what Red Bull's gotten out of the second seat, but even Red Bull was well ahead of them in the standings, and even without the DQs, I believe they would be a little bit ahead of them still. So I think that we're going to see better out of Ferrari. It seems like they've got some upgrades coming, especially on the rear end, that they think will help a little bit, but it's been a really disappointing start to the year. And like you mentioned earlier, we were talking about the Constructors' title. I think they're already kind of on the outside looking in. I think this is going to be more about trying to win a couple races this year and kind of work their way back to the top. Granted, like we just mentioned, new regs next year. So, they're going to have to start this process all over again. It's just really disappointing. Feels like a year where they had one chance really to make this work potentially. We'll see what they look like with the new car, but if this was their only shot, this is a really disappointing way for them to go out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at their results so far this year, an 8th and a 10th in Australia, they were on the wrong strategy there, but even on the right strategy, they weren't podium bound in that race. China, the double DSQ, they weren't podium bound in that race either, just based on pace before that. And then here they have a finish of 5th and 7th for the two guys. So it was just or maybe 4th and 7th. I think Leclerc finished 4th. But it's they're just not in the place right now, just based on pace and performance to even challenge if they are making the right strategy calls, even if they are doing all the right things behind the scenes. They're still just not there on pace. So I think that's the most worrying thing for me is the car just isn't there. Then, I mean, once you get that figured out, then you figure out the other things of what Hamilton and his race engineers and those guys have to figure out, just starting a new relationship together. Anything on Leclerc's side of the garage that hasn't seemed like it's been super great so far this year either. So the biggest problem right now is their pace, which just isn't there, and that's really worrying for me. Is you can't even put yourself in the right spot to make those right calls or make those mistakes if you're just not there on pace in the first place.
Yeah, and I think these upgrades will sort of decide the fate of their season. I mean, obviously a long way to go. Even if they don't completely nail this, they could find something maybe in the second half of the year, but I worry a little bit that just with all the frustration on both sides of the garage, really. You mentioned Leclerc there, and it seems like over the radio there's been a lot of frustration on Leclerc's end, but I know that Hamilton had high expectations for the season as well. So I just worry that if these upgrades, they don't get it right, that things could sort of devolve even more, and this could turn into a real disaster season for Ferrari. So I think this is sort of their moment. They need to find something quickly here in these next couple races, ideally maybe by Miami at the latest, for them to come in with some new upgrades, looking fresh and ready to go, and maybe have a bit of a reset mentally on what they expect from the season and what they can get out of the car. Like I said, I still think they can win races. I don't have really any doubt in my mind about the skill of the drivers. We know they're some of the best on the grid, and that's why we're pairing. So they kind of just need to get the car together and kind of have a little, a little powwow, I guess, here on their team strategy and what they want to figure out there, because they've got a few things they need to work on. It's all right there for them, but yeah, there's a long way to go on a few levels here.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. There's quite a ways to go for them right now. We're 1 week post the Yuki Lawson swap now, both in their new cars for one race. I personally think that Yuki has performed much better than what we saw out of Lawson through two races. Obviously, he still didn't finish in the points and qualified behind Lawson, but for a lot of the practice sessions there, he was pretty close to Max on pace, and at a track where we have mentioned many times already, it was very difficult to pass. I think just a poor qualifying run for Yuki ultimately kind of ruined his weekend, but I think there are good signs Yuki and that side of the garage that they could start scoring points and making a little bit of an impact for the team here soon.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I think that Yuki was already obviously off to a better start than what we saw from Lawson those first couple weekends. Definitely not on the level that they're looking for. They're looking for somebody that can be up there fighting with the top teams and find that pace. But I think it was a really unique situation this weekend for Yuki. He was under a lot of pressure coming in. His first race for Red Bull in Japan. He was really the star of the weekend. All eyes on him. And I think that we saw in practice that he had a lot of pace. I mean, I know it's just practice and it's always tough not to read too much into it, but there was some runs there in practice where he looked to be almost close to Verstappen on pace,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that I'm not expecting that from him week to week for him to match Verstappen or even be really super close, but I think that he just kind of didn't have his best qualifying, and then that carried over into a race where it was really make passes and find a way to get by guys. And I think that he'll find a new level, I think, probably in these next few races and come out. And I don't expect him to be winning races or even on a lot of podiums or anything, but I think that he'll be able to find a level eventually that Red Bull was looking for. I think this weekend was just a bit of a unique situation for him.
Yeah, I agree. And then on the other side of the garage for the Red Bull family, you have Lawson coming in and finishing 17th, qualifying 14th, moved up to 13th after the science penalty, but qualified in 14th and finished back in 17th. I think, it's not a good look for him when your teammate is up there in the points, but also Lawson was kind of just in that middle pack, and they tried something different with strategy down there to hopefully maybe find a way to get him into the points, run him long, hope for a safety car, and put him on the soft tire at the end. That just wasn't the right play for the day. So I don't think we can take too much just from his place finish in the race, but I thought it was a solid first weekend for him, just given everything that's happened and his coming back to this team. I thought there were points where he showed good pace, not obviously the whole weekend, but I think we'll start to see a lot better from him as we move forward here with his return to Racing Bulls. And I think it'll be pretty quickly he gets into the points here and starts to really make an impact again.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit funny to see him qualify ahead of Tsunoda, especially just by one spot there.
Yeah.
Kind of fulfilling what a lot of people saw for this weekend. But yeah, the race was kind of a different story. Tsunoda picking up a couple spots and him falling back a few. I don't think it's a total crisis mode. I think the last few weeks have probably been really tough on him, and probably give him a little bit of time to reacclimate. I do think in these next couple races they'll want to see something from him. I don't think he's going to get dropped mid-season at Racing Bulls, even if he struggles for a while here. I just think, obviously being a second team, there's not as high expectations, and they do have prospects waiting in the wings, but nobody knocking on the door like maybe a Colapinto at Alpine kind of situation.
Yeah.
So I think that he's going to have some time here to regroup and refine his form, and I think he will eventually in these next few weeks refine his form. Not consistent points or anything maybe, but just consistently solid performances from that car, which has had its moments. Obviously, Hadjar had a fantastic weekend this weekend, but week to week, it's just not going to be one of the fastest cars on the grid, and I think that gives him a little bit of a chance to breathe and just kind of get the most out of the car with a little less pressure.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's starting to reset now, kind of refine his footing in F1, and I think in the long term, this could end up being a good thing for him if he can come back down here and put in some really solid results, and maybe a spot opens up at one of the bigger teams later down the road, and he has a little bit better resume to go with it, and give him another chance at one of the best teams. I think it's it's not obviously where he wanted to be third race of the season after starting with Red Bull, but I think that there are there is room to grow here for him, and hopefully at least make something out of this season.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw Marco's quote about him getting demoted down to Racing Bulls, and that it was kind of a way not to kill his career by giving him a chance to rebound. And I thought that was a little bit of a funny quote, just coming from a team that just demoted him after 2 races.
Yeah.
But I think it does have a little bit of truth to it, in that if it gives him the rest of this year to kind of reset, refine his footing, like you said, maybe down the line he gets another chance, maybe a Red Bull, or maybe, I don't know if another top team will give him a chance after that, but maybe just a middle of the pack team, somewhere where he can have a consistent seat in F1. So I do think that there's a little bit of truth to that, even as ironic as the quote sounds, that maybe he'll get a little bit of a chance here to take a breath and readjust out.
Yeah, I mean, Helmut Marko does have some horrendous quotes, but I think that there is a little bit of truth to that one, and it is ironic coming from one of the bosses in that team. After you essentially fire a guy, to say, I think this is the best thing for him. It's a little bit ironic, but like you said, I think there is some truth to it as well. Let's move to our personal podiums now for the week in Japan. I had Max Verstappen number 1. I think we've already said everything we can about him so far. In second, I had Isaac Hadjar's first F1 points this weekend, along with the Q3 performance or appearance. I thought I was just very impressed with him so far this weekend, and really through these first 3 races, finished just outside the points in China. Obviously, the kind of embarrassing moment to start his career in Australia, but even then he was, in a great position after qualifying. In his first qualifying appearance of his F1 career. So yeah, I'm pretty what we've seen, and I thought he was able to even challenge Lewis there for a little bit in the Ferrari, and he's in a racing bull. So yeah, I thought it was a good weekend from him. And then third, I have Ollie Behrman, finished 10th after qualifying 10th, well ahead of his teammate Ocon, and he's just another rookie I've been so impressed with so far this season, able to get that Haas into the points. And they kind of started this weekend, pretty far behind in pace again, it seemed, but he was able to make his way forward, make some adjustments throughout the weekend to himself, to the car, and ultimately got rewarded with at least 1 point for it. So good to see from Behrman as well. I think that there were some pretty midfield actually this week. We were all focused on Max, but if you look a little deeper, there were some solid drives from some other guys as well.
Yeah, I've got a pretty similar podium here. I've got Max first as well. Again, we just had a long conversation about him, but one of his all-time great performances. Had to have him in first. And then I have Hadjar second as well. A really fantastic weekend from him to come in 8th. He's just been, like you mentioned, that incident in Australia really could have set him back for a while and really could have killed his mindset there. But he comes back strong and has really looked impressive since then, especially this weekend, getting the car into Q3 and then coming out and keeping it in the points here, finishing 8th. So, and I don't have Behrman third just because I wanted to switch it up a little bit, but I do think that just it's a good time to give the rookies as a whole a little bit more shine here.
Yeah. Just
Hadjar with a great performance, Antonelli coming in and being really close to Russell on pace pretty much the whole season so far. We think of Russell as one of the better drivers in the series, and Antonelli comes in at 18 and is already looking to be up to par there. And then you mentioned Behrman as well, has really been fantastic, really gotten the most out of the car almost every weekend since he's been in F1, including last year. So those 3 especially have been phenomenal. I think the Lawson thing has been not great, and Bortoletto's in a little bit of a tough situation at Sauber.
Yeah.
We'll see how the Duon thing plays out, but those 3 especially, I think, really have been fantastic so far, and just deserve a little bit of shine there for what they've done so early in their career. But my third, just to switch it up a little bit, I've gone with Alex Albon, and part of that is just him 3 weekends in a row really getting the most out of that car, it feels like, and just putting the Williams in the points 3 weekends in a row, even if it's faster than it has been the last few years, is still really impressive. And we'll get to I've got a little more to say about his teammate later on, but he's really dominated so far against Carlos Sainz in a way that I think a lot of us didn't expect. Granted, he's probably more familiar with the Williams setup, but it's still very impressive what he's done so far.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with you on the Albon thing, and it's funny. This during the Grand Prix, he seemed pretty upset with how things were going. just with the strategy and some of the other team decisions. More upset than I've really heard him in a while on the radio, but he still managed to come out with some solid points this weekend. And then the other thing, you mentioned Duhan there, had that big crash in practice earlier this week. And I'm not sure if you saw, but after the race, Ocon and a mechanic had to help him out of the car. He seemed pretty banged up. So I think he, wasn't in a super good place to be, putting in a maximum performance during the Grand Prix this weekend, but he's just trying to fight for his life in that car, and got to give him a lot of credit there for going out there when he's not 100% right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely worried about that situation because we got a triple header here, a lot of races in a row, and I'm just worried that he's pushing himself a little bit too far, but he can't really do anything. He can't give up that seat now. If he takes a weekend off or whatnot and they put Colapinto in the seat or somebody else, he might not get the seat back.
Yeah, exactly.
So he kind of has to push through, unfortunately. So credit to him for pushing through and giving it a go. I'm certainly not holding this weekend against him too much. I think that even if it was a little bit unsafe, I think that what he was trying to do was definitely creative and pushing the box a little bit, and that's kind of what you have to do if you're in a position like him and get the most you can out of the car. So you credit to him for being creative, even if it turned out to, kind of ruin his weekend in some ways.
Yeah. I just, wanted to shout him out just because he seems like he's really battling a lot of things right now, and he's still putting in what I think is, some decent performances, even despite that fact. So hard to drive an F1 car in the first place, let alone hurt as well. But let's move to our stinker of the week, and mine, I would say the McLarens, but I think we already touched on them a good bit, just missing out on, a possible 1-2 finish there. So I'll say Lance Stroll, just because he finished DFL and was the only driver a lap down while his teammate was, fighting just outside the points, finished 11th. So not sure exactly what happened to Stroll in this race. I think he started on softs and just was kind of off strategy to everyone else. But to be the only one to finish a lap down in a car that your teammate was battling for points in, not. I think Stroll started out the season the first 2 weekends kind of strong, and this weekend just nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I've given Stroll a little bit of a pass for this weekend, just given what he did the first 2 weekends and looking much better. Honestly, he's done much better than Alonso has these first few races from a points perspective, which has kind of surprised me. I think Alonso will catch up over time, but that's certainly a little bit of a shocker to start the season. So I'm giving him a little bit of a pass, even though this was a rough weekend for Lance Stroll. Stinker of the week, I actually switched it up. I had a couple guys in mind, a couple teams in mind, but I ended up going with Carlos Sainz just because he's gotten really dominated so far by Alex Albon these first few weekends, and this weekend another weekend where he struggles. He doesn't make it into Q3, ends up with the penalty, and then finishes in 14th. Again, a little bit of a tough one to judge because it was so hard for everyone to pass out there. So, it would have been a lot to ask maybe for him to get all the way up into the points, but that goes back to the qualifying issues. Even without the penalty, he still was not good enough in qualifying. And so that's 3 weekends in a row. Australia obviously has the incident under safety car, which was disappointing for a driver of his experience level. And then China, he kind of lucks into points with the penalties elsewhere, especially with the Ferraris there. And then another disappointing weekend here. So just really a rough start for Carlos Sainz. I'm not totally pushing the panic button yet. Just with him on a new team, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get up to speed, but certainly disappointing so far in his Williams career.
Yeah, I think it's been a really disappointing start, to be honest, and not one I was expecting when he looked so good in testing and, really looked good to start the weekend in Australia as well. And then ever since that crash under the safety car, it just hasn't been the same for him. A lot to adjust to coming from Ferrari to Williams. So I'm going to give him just a little bit more time, but I do think we need to start seeing some stuff from him soon, considering how good his teammate has been so far. Also, kind of a good look for Albon to be dominating that teammate battle the way he is so far. So yeah, Williams, I think there's a lot of interest there just with their driver lineup, and they seem to be making some steps in the right direction there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all thought that this was going to be close to the beginning of the year, but so far Albon is 18-1 in points, and I don't think that margin, especially proportionally, is going to catch up the rest of the year. Like, I don't think that's going to be what ends up happening, where Albon is just miles ahead for the entire year. But I do think that that's going to be a lot to overcome. There is pace in the car, so there's chances for Sainz to maybe make a comeback here, but spotting him 17 points in the first few races is certainly not ideal. We never know that Williams could start off well and then lose pace as the season goes on, and teams make more upgrades, or you never know, they could progress well. But I just think that's a really rough start for him and going to be tough to overcome in the long haul in that battle with Albon.
Yeah, I think it's one of the battles, and one that we're definitely going to keep an eye on as Sainz gets a little bit more time in the Williams here. Let's go to our predicted winner for next week and our predicted podium for next week. I have Lando Norris getting back in on the top step of the podium after a week where you could say he should have won. One of the McLarens should have won that race. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to a new track at Bahrain that is kind of, it's a little bit more of it's definitely a different style track than what we see at Suzuka, and one that's kind of more cookie cutter, and I think will help out that McLaren and take them, give their pace advantage even more of an advantage over the rest of the field. And second, I have Max Verstappen coming off, such an incredible weekend. I think he's is obviously in a great place right now, and can take that car to heights it probably shouldn't be. So I see him getting another podium here this week. And then in a third, I actually have George Russell. I just think just trying to mix things up a little bit, and I think Russell's had a pretty good start to the a track that we might have some more overtaking and some more stuff happen than what we had last week in Suzuka. I think Russell might be able to sneak his way onto another podium this year. So Norris, Verstappen, Russell is my predicted podium next week.
Yeah, I've switched it up a little bit here compared to you. I've got a guy who's not on your podium winning, and that's Oscar Piastri. Just we've seen them already swap spots a little bit in these first few races. Norris faster first, and then Piastri, and then Norris again. I've gone with Piastri to come back this week and get the win here in Bahrain. And then Max Verstappen in second, right behind Piastri, I think is going to give him another good battle, and I'm excited to see if he can maximize the car once again this weekend. And then I've gone with Lando Norris in third. Still both McLarens on the podium, but we've seen so far that even with their pace, they're not an automatic 1-2 every weekend. So I'm going to say they both make the podium, but I'm going to say Piastri in first this time and Verstappen in second, right ahead of Norris.
Yeah, I like that podium. I think, I was a great shot at the podium. I just kind of thought, something a little bit different for Bahrain, just, because the track, I think we might have a little bit more chaos there and a little bit more passing and stuff. So, just a little bit of a different podium, but I think Oscar definitely has a shot at the podium or the win as well next week. My one bold prediction for Bahrain is that Pierre Gasly picks up Alpine's first points of the season. It's kind of wild that they're the only team that hasn't scored a point yet, that the Saubers have, that the Haas's have scored as many points as they have. They looked, dismal in Australia to start the season. And I think that changes this weekend with Gasly. He's been kind of right on the edge of the points all year. Gasly, he finished last year with some great drives, and I think he's going to pick up where he left off and get some good momentum going again for that Alpine team.
Yeah, so my bold prediction is that Yuki Tsunoda finds that form this weekend, and he finishes within those top four teams there, up in the top 8. I know that that's not a mind-blowing prediction like a podium or anything, but we've seen the first few races that trouble with the Red Bull car, trouble for the second drivers, and I think that, like I mentioned earlier, we saw flashes of pace from Yuki in practices. I think that getting that Japan weekend behind him, getting a little more time to settle, getting used to being in a top team, I think that he's going to deliver this weekend. And maybe not be up there, like I said, in the podium places, but just a solid points finish here for Yuki Tsunoda, and that second Red Bull seat finally gets some points on the table for him.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that we're at a point where, the guy who won last week, his teammate, is a bold prediction to finish in the top 8, but that's where we are right now with the second Red Bull seat. So, yeah, I like that prediction, and I think Yuki will probably get at least points this weekend, if not that top 8. So, I think that's a good call there.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely back him to kind of improve and start to find that form and find what they're looking for in that second seat.
Yeah, I agree. Well, next up we have the NASCAR race from Darlington, where Denny Hamlin steals a win late after a great pit stop put him ahead of the other dominant teams of the day. But an overtime win, his second straight win after Martinsville last week. And, you can say he didn't deserve it, but at the end of the day, his pit crew, did the best job, got him out ahead when he needed it most. And sometimes that's just motorsport. I mean, you get the caution when you need it and your pit crew performs and you take advantage of it. And, that's that. And you also have to perform when you get that advantage. And Denny was able to hold him off on that late restart, kind of pull away from the field there and get his second straight win. So you could say it's luck. You could say he stole it. And, there are guys who deserved it more. But at the end of the day, that's just motorsport sometimes. And Denny took advantage of a good opportunity and got out with another win.
Yeah, he did. I mean, this was certainly not a race that I saw Denny Hamlin winning, even though he has a good record at these kinds of tracks. William Byron was so dominant on the day. One of the most dominant performances, it felt like, of the season, even though he didn't come out on top. It was just so impressive, winning the first 2 stages, leading as many laps as he did. I believe they said it was the most of his career on the broadcast. So, and then, even at the end there, it looked like maybe Tyler Reddick would have it for a minute. It looked like maybe Christopher Bell had a shot, which was really impressive considering where they came from at the start of the day. But, yeah, I mean, this was Denny Hamlin once again stealing the show, right place, right time, but also, just one of those veteran guys that is always going to put the car where it needs to be. And, a great performance from him, even if it's not one of his all-time best. It still gets the job done, and getting himself up there with the Bells and Byrons is one of the elite drivers of the season.
Yeah, racing, we always think of it as a individual sport, and all of it being on these drivers, but there's a lot more to it than that. There's pit crews for a reason, there's pit stops for a reason, and that's part of the game sometimes, is having the best team around you, not just the best driver to get it done and get that win. Not to say Denny didn't drive a good race. I think he drove it. Like we said, Byron leading all those laps, dominating the day. Obviously, I think he deserved the win a little bit more, and you could say the same, but I think he deserved the win a bit more, those two guys. But, Denny, in the right place at the right time, and second straight win, like you said, getting himself up there with, how Byron, how Bell have been this year, and coming back from where he did. I know he started third, but he kind of got pushed back in the pack a little bit early on, and Denny making his way back up there. He had to be up and around the top 5-ish to take advantage of that good pit stop anyways, so it's not like he was driving a very poor race at that point. It was a good performance from Denny. Not one that we'll remember as one of Denny's greats, but at the same time, a win is a win nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for, in that situation. At the end of the day, like you said, a win is a win. And just there were so many great guys at the end of this race, guys that gave this a good run. So that made it all the more impressive. I just mentioned the Reddick and Bell, and, of course, Byron being as dominant as he was, but Ryan Blaney as well coming in at the end. Really unlucky, again, not to win this race, but just been that kind of year for Blaney, but still really impressive run from him, and even more impressive from Hamlin to hold a guy like that off and secure another win.
Yeah, I mean, poor Blaney fans, man, at this point in shambles. Just, nothing's gone right for them this year.
Mm-hmm.
Both the super speedway races, up running in the front, got involved in wrecks, and still managed to get good results. And you've had other points throughout the year where things have gone wrong with the pit crew, or just mechanical issues. He's had 2 engines blow out. I mean, just everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And you add on top of that, he runs down the leader in one of the better rundowns we've seen in a long time in NASCAR. Passes him, and not even 2 seconds later, Larson's in the wall, and all of that long run speed and all that effort that he put in just goes away like that, and ends up not even really sniffing a win at the end of the day. So I just think it's really, really tough to be Blaney or a Blaney fan right now.
Yeah, and it's really crazy as well, not to hijack the Denny Hamlin segment with Ryan Blaney, but it's crazy that he's 7th in the standings right now, and really not that far off these top guys. I mean, he wins a race or two, and all of a sudden he's right up there with the Byrons and Hamlins and Bells at the top of the standings. It's just really impressive that he's been able to do that with all the bad luck they've had this year. It feels like it'll come around eventually, and we'll see him in October, November in the chase, doing what he always does, in the playoffs and potentially winning a championship. But yeah, it's just been a wild season for that 12 car so far. And, I'm interested to see if it keeps on going that way or if they can finally break the curse a little bit here and get a win.
Yeah, I think they're just due at this point, just with how they've ran so far this year. In none of these races they've run poorly, and like you said, I think the reason they're in 7th is they're probably good stage points in all these races, just not having really the finishes to show for it. Although he has had some good finishes despite these issues. Like I mentioned, those first couple races, being in wrecks and still getting good results, and then here probably should have won but still managed a really good result. I don't really know what else to say for Blaney this year, other than I think his time's coming soon to get that first win, and I think once he does, he'll kind of be off and running and probably leap up the standings pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he's tied for the most DNFs this season with 3, and he's still right up there in 7th in the standings, ahead of guys like Logano and Alex Bowman, and right behind the top guys in the series. So it's definitely coming soon for them. I just feel sorry for the 12 team. Obviously, he's won a title recently. It's not a guy with a long drought like a Hamlin or someone, but still, just really bad luck to start their year.
Yeah, well, let's move to the personal top 3 for each of us from Darlington. And first, I have William Byron. He led the first 243 laps of this race, and I thought it was one of the most dominant performances we've seen in quite some time in NASCAR. However, some decisions, some actions late in the race from that 24 team cost him a shot at a win that probably should have been his, and the one that he deserved the most, I think, just based on his driving alone. Car wasn't the same once they got back in traffic after they waited a bit too long on that pit stop, got behind Bell and Reddick, and then obviously stuck in traffic on that last restart as well. Just didn't have the car for it in the end. So at the end of the day, he probably should have been the one that got the win over even Blaney and Hamlin. But yeah, just a really good run for him, and a good sign that just he was able to put in such a great performance all day. Second, I have Ryan Blaney. Like I mentioned, him running down Reddick there at the end from 17 seconds down with like 50 laps to go was a good of run as I've seen for quite some time as well, running down the leader for the win. That late caution cost him, like we mentioned already, but I thought it was a really solid performance from Blaney, and he had definitely the best long run car of the day for sure. Also was just put back in the field multiple times by poor pit stops as well, that if he's running up higher throughout most of the day, I think things might have been a little different for him. And then in third, I had Denny Hamlin. Got the win, but wasn't the best car, wasn't better than the 2 guys ahead of him. So I still think you got to be on the podium if you get the win. But yeah, I think the other 2 guys deserved it just a bit more.
So for me, I've gone with William Byron as well in first. Really not much more to say. One of the most impressive performances of the year. And like you mentioned, just a little bit of bad strategy at the end, and unlucky with the cautions and everything, and just such a disappointing way to end what really could have been one of the most dominant wins of the year if they had come through. I've gone with Ryan Blaney in second as well, just with that performance at the end, the chase down those last few laps until the cautions, that was one of the most impressive runs of the season from him. And just really disappointing, like we mentioned, not to get a win here and be left out on the outside looking in once again. And then my third, I've gone with Christopher Bell. Now, I think Hamlin obviously has a great argument here winning the race, but Bell comes from further back in 17th, and they were way down the pecking order early in this race, all the way down in the high 20s, even into the 30s, I believe, for a while. And they make a big comeback coming up all the way to finish in third. And it kind of goes to both drivers, both Bell and Hamlin. Seemed like JGR had some struggles in this race with the cars, and they made the right adjustments and end up, with two drivers finishing in first and third here. So really kind of a shout out here to JGR as a whole. I've given it to Bell just for the comeback that they've had, but Hamlin as well, like we mentioned, ran a great race, started in third and was one of the better cars all day, and then ended up right place, right time at the end. So, yeah, shout out to JGR for making some impressive changes there and really maximizing what they could have gotten out of this race.
Yeah, I think JGR, like you said, really maximized this day as a whole, as a team. Gibbs up there as well. Mm-hmm. We'll get to him in a minute. But Chase Briscoe is really the only one that didn't. Kind of shocked to see him drop back the way he did. He was running good for most of the day. My stinker of the week for Darlington is Kyle Larson, and not because of that accident at the end. He checked up. Reddick was in the wall in front of him. He checked up. He was, Bubba was right behind him. No time to really stop, and that accident came out. That was unfortunate for Blaney, but I thought it was because I have him stinker of the week because he took himself out of the race on lap 4 on a track that I thought he had a great opportunity to win, and one that he's been very good at for a long time. Like I said earlier in the week, it's kind of checkers or records for him here on tracks like this at Darlington, at Homestead, places like that. So, Larson could have been a better week, should have been a better week. And I just think if he would have taken it a bit easier early on, he would have been there at the end and probably would have been fighting for that win at the end instead of causing the wreck that brought out that late restart.
Yeah, I think unfortunately there's a good amount of contenders this week for Stinker of the Week. I've gone with Brad Keselowski, but part of that is just the number 6 team as a whole. Really seemed like they had some pace. They started in 20th, but ran in the top 10 for a while. Feels like it could have been a really good day for RFK, but then they have a lug nut fall off and end up spinning, and Brad ends up finishing in 33rd. Just really disappointing because this was a guy that I had pegged at the start of the race that, it was a guy that just really needed a good day and really needed like a top 10 performance here, given what he's done so far this year and given his history at Darlington. Just really needed a good day and ends up finishing all the way back in 33rd. And, I think you could say the same thing a little bit too for Ryan Preece, started in second and finished in 26th, was disappointing as well. Chris Buescher finishing up in 6th kind of saves RFK's day a little bit, but this was a day that should have been a lot better for them as a team and ends up finishing pretty rough.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe just RFK should be stinker of the week, but
yeah,
Buescher saved them a little bit. It sucks for Brad because I thought he was one that should have a great week this week. Even had him to top 5 here. Ultimately, I thought he was running a good race, should have probably finished in the top 10 before that lug nut thing, and you just can't be making those mistakes, especially with a guy who's such a bad start to the year as he has, when you have an opportunity to have a good run. So, it's tough for Brad, nothing against him. I don't think he did anything wrong, but the team got to step up a little bit and get some better results for your guy because he's trying everything right now and just isn't really getting anything for it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was at. It was more of a team thing than a driver thing. Brad had a fine day, just, a team mistake really costing them there and really costing him an opportunity at some good points.
Yeah, for sure. Some other notable results from the week. Ty Gibbs finishing 9th, his best finish of the season, I believe, after a really rough start for him, similar to Brad K. Those have been the two guys that have been talked about the most for their bad starts to the season. He's had good performances here in the past, so not really a surprise to see him finishing in the top 10. But just based on how he's run so far this year, I think it is a little bit good to see him kind of righting the ship. Hopefully he can get it moving in the right direction and maybe make a playoff push for that team in the 54 squad.
Yeah, it's a nice rebound, and that's, like I just mentioned, that was kind of the weekend I was looking for from Brad. But to come in ninth here and get that top 10, I was, just looking at the results and watching the race, I was more focused on what Bell and Hamlin were doing up front. But it's really still a great result for Ty coming in ninth here and kind of getting some confidence back, hopefully. Like we both mentioned, we both have a lot of confidence in him to right the ship eventually, and I think this is a good start down that track.
Yeah, then next up, Kyle Busch finishing 10th. I thought it was a good run for him, one of his better runs probably since Coda, where he had a great chance to win, ultimately didn't have the tires. But here, I thought it was a good run for Busch to get that team back up in the top 10. I think he's on the right track. He's getting things better than they were last year. With RCR, I don't know if he's going to be in the position to win a ton of races there or even fight for a championship at any point the rest of his time at RCR, however long that is. But they're kind of getting back in the right place to get some solid finishes, top fives, and maybe a win or two for him throughout the course of his season as well.
Yeah, I was happy to see this one. I think really other than that Coda performance, he's been kind of an afterthought for me so far this year. But, this ends up being, I believe, his fourth top 10 of the year. And so he has had some nice runs. And I think I would love to see him back up in a position where it looks like maybe he could win like he was at Coda. So I think he's on the right track. And hopefully these next few races he can find a track that suits him well and put that car in position to win and finally break this streak.
Yeah, he did finish 8th after his 5th place finish at Coda. So he's finished higher than 10th since, but that was the race after. So it's been, 3 or 4 races now since we've seen him back in the top 10. And a good finish for him, I think. And then Ty Dillon finishing 16th. It's got to be his best finish of the year. If maybe he was higher on one of the super speedways, I'm not sure. But I thought it was a good run for him. The team kind of played the strategy right and got him up higher with some good track position, and I guess he was able to hold onto the tires and do pretty well, and a decent throwback scheme as well for Ty Dillon. It hasn't been the worst start to the year for him, to be honest, that I thought it might be. I thought there would be some big struggles for him with that team, and kind of Colleague's probably really second car after AJ Allmendinger. So it's been good for him. I think that there's still plenty of room to improve, but it's been better so far this year than I anticipated.
Yeah, I got to give him a little bit of a credit. He's already got almost as many top 20s so far this year as he had in his last full year with Spire back in 2023. He's only one away. He did have a little bit better finish earlier in the year. He finished 14th at Daytona, so like you mentioned, super speedway. Yeah. And then Martinsville last weekend, he actually was right there too with a 15th finish. So he's had a few decent runs, and yeah, so I got to give him credit where credit's due, making the most out of that Kaulig car, at least out of a few races here. And it would be really good to see him get back in the top 10 here at some point. Been a few years since we've seen that. Back in 2022 at the Bristol Dirt Race, I believe, was the last time that he was in the top 10. So would love to see that on a paved track this time, and see him come through with a little better performance. But so far so good for Ty Dillon compared to where my expectations were at the beginning of the year. Yeah, for sure. And then SVG in 20th place finish, his highest on an oval so far in his NASCAR career. I think that there's good signs from this. Darlington was a place that he did pretty well. I had a feeling this would be one of his better oval tracks. I thought last week at Martinsville might be good for him as well. He's been pretty decent on the short tracks, but to do much there. But this week had a good run. Super good to see this, and hopefully we get some more good oval finishes for him coming up. He's also had some kind of bad luck at points this year on ovals, just some mistakes with the team, some untimely cautions put him in bad positions, but he's also made mistakes as a driver as well. And I think that there's a lot of improvement to be made on these ovals. I think we're going to start seeing it pretty soon show up for SVG. He wasn't terrible on the ovals in Xfinity, but
the Xfinity car and the Cup car are pretty different, so it's going to take him time to adjust to that as well. And I think we're starting to see it, and it hasn't been the best year for Trackhouse either, just on performance. So I think that's part of it as well. But good run for SVG, and hopefully a sign for better things to come here soon.
Yeah, this was exciting to see from SVG. Just not a amazing performance from a position standpoint, but just to see him make some progress on these ovals, like you said, hasn't had the best luck so far, but I think there were some signs in the Xfinity series that he can come out on these ovals and put in solid performances. I'm not expecting him to win any of them, but if he can put in some respectable performances on these ovals, maybe in that top 20 range, I think that combined with what he can do on the road courses and maybe even super speedways, I think that he's got potential still to make the playoffs like we both thought he could at the beginning of the year. Yeah,
I still think he's one of those guys to watch out for in the playoffs, because I think he will get a win on one of these road courses coming up. And if he can get those oval finishes into, consistently being in the top 20s, they don't have to be top 5s, top 10s, but top 15s, top 20s, I think that would be great and kind of set him up for a decent NASCAR career moving forward here. So a good finish for SVG, and one that I think is pushing him in the right direction.
Yep. Yeah, I'm fully with you here. I'm excited to see where he goes from here.
We got a lot of, discourse this week about NASCAR Throwback Week. We always get a lot with the schemes and how they look, but this year I feel like it was a little bit more focused be doing the Throwback Weekend at all moving forward. Chase Elliott said he thought it's run its course. Some other guys have said that as well. Kyle Busch kind of backed it and said if the fans are liking it, we should keep doing it. To me, I think it's great, and I think we should keep doing it for as long as we can. I kind of get some of the points that we're going to run out of schemes and all that, but at the end of the day, I think it's fun, and even if we have repeat schemes, I still think it's fun to kind of look back at the past, and a lot of those schemes were a lot better than the schemes that we have right now, I think. So it's just it kind of makes the track look better and the race look better as well, and Darlington seems like a good place for it, and you also get some of these guys to return to the track. Carl Edwards was out there waving the flag to start the race. Greg Biffle was in the pace car up in the booth as well, and the Petty brothers, or the Petty guys, were up there. So yeah, a lot of good stuff, and super. I think it should continue, and I think it's an overall good, but I can understand where they're coming from, but to me, it's just a lot of fun, and I think it should stay.
Yeah, I was kind of thrown off by these comments from Chase Elliott and from any of the fans that are kind of tired of this Throwback Weekend. I think that it's great for the series. I think it brings a lot of publicity seeing which schemes are going to get used on a year-to-year basis. And I think, too, even if you're going back to the same schemes every year, if you're still only running it once a year, I think there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And I think that the fans would still be excited to see a lot of those. So for me, I think it's a no-brainer to keep this going. And you might have to get a little more creative if you want to change the schemes every year. Like we saw Josh Berry's scheme was based off of a Lotus IndyCar that the Wood brothers had affiliation with. And, so it may not be the same thing every year, and you may have to get more creative down the line, but I still think there's a lot more to choose from, and I think it would be worth it to keep this weekend going on a year-to-year basis, even if we see the same schemes. Like I said, just to see them once a year, I think would be really cool, and I don't really see any reason why we should stop doing it.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a celebration of the past in NASCAR and motorsport in general. Like you mentioned, the Lotus scheme coming over for Josh Berry, I thought that looked great on a Cup car. So I think it's just a great way to kind of look back at the past, and also, like Chase Elliott, you can't really talk about anything with your the throwback stuff. Your car was the worst of the throwbacks by far. It wasn't even, I don't know what it was. It didn't really look like any throwback. The one that it was compared to, I don't think it looked the same. So, kind of get out of here with that stuff, Chase. Like, let's have some fun and maybe throw a good throwback in there as well. There's a lot of good Napa throwbacks that you could do that I'm sure Napa would love as, one of your main sponsors. So let's stick to that stuff and have some fun with this instead of kind of poo-pooing all over it.
I'm in the same boat. Yeah, let's have some fun with it. let's go crazy, even if it's not only throwbacks. Maybe it's just a custom scheme you want to try and run
Yeah.
once. Just something. I do agree with that week to week. There's too much changing with these schemes, and
Yeah,
that some
sure.
more uniformity week to week would be a good thing. But once a year,
Yeah.
do something different. Try and change it up a little bit. I think Darlington is the perfect place to do it, and I think that it's something that the fans and a lot of the drivers all like. So I don't really see any reason to stop it.
Yeah, and even it doesn't even have to be a throwback scheme per se. It can be some of your bigger sponsors for your team. You know, if they want to put their old logos or whatever. Kind of like this year, Busch Light with Ross Chastain. They didn't do a throwback kind of thing, but I think last year they had a throwback car that it wasn't a throwback like to any old NASCAR, but it was a throwback to kind of an older Busch Light style look and brand and feel. So I thought, you can even do stuff like that. I think that's fun. So just, from my opinion, just like keep it fun and do some wacky stuff, do some fun stuff, some throwbacks, and it helps the brands out. The fans love it. It sells merch. So overall, I think it's a positive, and I think it should stay even if we run out of schemes like we're worried about here.
Yeah, I think it's a slam dunk to keep this around. Really no reason not to, in my opinion. It's just don't understand it at all.
Yeah. Some other news coming from NASCAR this week. Connor Zilisch is set to run the Coke 600 with Trackhouse. I love this. I think it's going to be great. I'm a big Connor Zilisch believer and fan in his abilities. He's done pretty well in the Xfinity Series so far this year. Obviously known for his road course stuff, but he's pretty solid on ovals too. And I think that this is another step towards Zilisch making a full-time Cup debut in either next year or in the coming years. The more experience he gets with Trackhouse, I think the better for him.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. I'm excited to see him get some oval experience at the top level. I think he's one of the most exciting prospects of this next generation of NASCAR, like we talked about, and I think it'll be good for him. We know his prowess on road courses and what he's done there. Obviously, just winning the Xfinity race at COTA and looked good for a while in the Cup race as well. I think it would be great to see him come out and do something on an oval here and, get some more experience against the top guys. I think it's good for everyone.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think he's one of the better talents we have coming up. So the more we see him in Cup, the better, and kind of a look towards the future there, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting story, Legacy Motorsport suing Rick Ware Racing over kind of a charter dispute. Rick Ware was going to sell a charter to Legacy, I believe, in 2027, Rick Ware thought it was going to be in 2027. Legacy thought it was going to be in 2026. They're trying to get out of that contract now and just change things up there because of the dispute between the years of sale. I thought that was interesting and just kind of more charter agreement and charter stuff in NASCAR that I think is, there's a lot to be said about NASCAR's business. The charters, I think, is something that's one of the most talked about parts of it, and I think this kind of adds to that whole storyline and confusion.
Yeah, this is one of the most bizarre stories I've read all year. I think that at the end of the day, this kind of falls on Rick Ware for seemingly not reading the agreement here, or Rick Ware Racing, I should say, or the team as a whole. Just a really bizarre situation to sort of seemingly come to this verbal agreement and then not read the contract. Just really don't understand it at all. But just bizarre all around.
Yeah, I'm not sure what, I guess they had to have just not read it because I mean, I think you would see pretty clearly in it that it would have a date and a time of sale when this is supposed to take place. So I guess I don't know how you kind of defend this lawsuit if you're Rick Ware Racing. I think this should be one that Legacy wins pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be much to solve here. You sign the contract, it says what it says. At the end of the day, you got to either read somebody to read it through it for you, and that's just a major oversight on their end.
Yeah, and Legacy also took some shots at Rick Ware's performance, Rick Ware Racing's performance, in that that piece of piece of paper, piece of legal document that they put out, about Rick Ware and that whole situation. And then lastly, we have another bizarre legal dispute in NASCAR involving Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Lamar Jackson. Lamar is upset with Dale Earnhardt Jr. over the number 8, the stylized 8 that he had, not the DEI old style 8 that they've brought back now for junior motorsport, but the one that they have run for the past couple years prior here. I guess Lamar is saying that, his number 8 and that number 8 it would confuse consumers and buying and selling stuff from Lamar Jackson, and they'd get it confused with the Dale Earnhardt stuff, and just a wild story, kind of mixing NFL and NASCAR stuff. And I wouldn't have expected to see a Lamar Jackson, Dale Earnhardt Jr. anything really in my life, having those two guys correlate in any way. But here we are, Lamar Jackson getting after it with Dale Earnhardt Jr. But I think that's been settled since, and I think everything's squared away there now.
Yeah, this was a confusing one too, just because I don't really know what ground Lamar Jackson had to stand on here, or I don't know if it was him or if it was his legal team or who was trying to pursue this really. But it's seemingly just over the use of the number 8, which hundreds of athletes have worn professionally over the years, and certainly isn't just his. We've seen other great NFL quarterbacks wear the number 8 as well. So really bizarre scenario, but I'm glad it seems like it's been worked out and everything's okay now, because that was just a really confusing headline to read.
Yeah, not one that I expected to see really at any point, just anything Lamar Jackson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. related. Let's get back to the racing here, though. Next week, NASCAR goes to Bristol. My predicted winner here is going to be Denny Hamlin to make it 3 straight. This is probably Hamlin's best track in NASCAR, if not his best, one of his best, certainly. Average finish of 3.8 and 2 wins in his last 4 races here. Just kind of been really dominant here as of late, and since the next-gen car has been introduced, he seems to have something here that no one else really has, and I think I got to go with that. It's hard to win 3 straight in NASCAR, but we've seen it once already this year from another guy on his team at JGR, and if anybody can do it 3 times in a row, again, I think Denny can.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick, and certainly a guy that was on my radar. We're going to do a bold prediction here in a second, but my winner and my bold prediction go together, so I'll just go ahead and do it in one swoop. I think that we just talked having a disappointing weekend this past weekend. I'm going to make the bold prediction to say that this weekend they figure it out and get back in the winner's circle. But I'm going to go with Chris Buescher here to get the job done. Nice. He won here back in fall of 2022 and one of the better drivers here in the last few years in the next-gen era at Bristol. So I'm going to say that he gets the job done here and wins. I think all 3 of their drivers have a top 10 average in the next-gen era here at Bristol. So I think it's going to be a good weekend for the team as a whole, and wanted to go with something a little bit more outside the box here this weekend for a win. So I'm going to say that Chris Buescher gets the job done in Bristol.
Yeah, I like that pick. I think Buescher has been solid this year, not great, but I think he has the performances here in the back it up, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get to victory lane as well. So yeah, I think we have a very good weekend ahead of racing between Formula One and NASCAR. But we also have IndyCar up here as well next weekend. They're returning after a couple weeks off for Long Beach, and the Long Beach Grand Prix there, along with IMSA, is going to be there as well. I skipped my one bold prediction for. I had Tyler Reddick finishing outside the top 25, not his best track, with an average finish of 22.5 in his last 3 seasons at Bristol. Doesn't really seem like the kind of thing that Reddick is super great at. We see him perform very well at road courses and at 1.5 miles and intermediates, but I feel like tracks like Bristol and things like that, he doesn't really show up as well. So I'm going to have him finishing outside the top 25 here and not having a great week there for 23-11.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, that's a good call. probably just not going to be his weekend this
Yeah.
weekend. But he has run a really good season so far. I thought maybe he'd take a step back this year, but it hasn't happened so far. He's been one of the better drivers, and 2311 on the whole, at least between him and Bubba Wallace, has had a pretty good year. So,
Yeah.
it just maybe not his weekend this weekend.
Yeah, I think that they've had a good year, but I don't think this track is really suited for him as much. Now to IndyCar at Long Beach. My predicted winner here is going to be Colton Herta. He's top 5 here 3 of the past 4 seasons, with a win here in 2021 as well. Seems like a good weekend for him to kind of break through and win for the first time in 2025 after we've had Alex Palou dominance so far this year. Palou is probably the easy pick, and he'll probably win this weekend, but I just wanted to go a little bit different, and I think Herta in another Honda-powered car is going to get the job done.
Yeah, so for me, I've gone with Joseph Newgarden here to get the job done at Long Beach. He's got 10 straight top 10s at Long Beach, which is really impressive.
Yeah.
Not something that I realized, honestly, before I started researching my pick here. That includes a win in 2022, and he's had a few other finishes in the podium places, but he's 7th right now in the championship. Not terrible, but I'm sure he'd like to be a little higher, and I think this is the weekend that he makes a move up the standings. I think that it's going to be tough for Palou to have a real challenger this year in the title chase, and I still back him to win the championship, but I think Newgarden, if he can win on a track like this, and as we get later in the season get some more ovals, is one of the guys that could maybe give him a little bit of a run. And so I think that could start here this weekend, and I'm going to say that Joe win at Long Beach.
Yeah, if he could get a win here or really any road course and then start to put together what we know he's capable of on the ovals, I think he's definitely one that could challenge Palou. And 10 straight top 10s here is a really good stat and just shows he's got that longevity, and this is a track that he seems to really love, so I think that's a great pick. My one bold prediction for Long Beach is Felix Rosenqvist gets on the podium. He has finishes of 7th and 5th so far this year. I just really like what I'm seeing from him and Meyer Shank so far since they've come together in their second season now as a pairing. They got off to a fast start last year. They've gotten off to a fast start this year as well, with some good finishes to back it up. So I like what I'm seeing right now, and if I had to pick anyone from the outside kind of to finish on the podium, I'm liking Felix Rosenqvist.
Yeah, I like that one. I think he's had one of the most impressive seasons so far of anyone in IndyCar, so I think that's a great pick. I'm going to go with Marcus Ericsson here to find his form and rebound, really. I mean, he comes in 6th in St. Pete, has a really solid race there to start the year, and then really struggles at Thermal Club, comes in 21st, was my stinker of the week for that race. But I think he's going to rebound here. He's got back-to-back top 5s at Long Beach, so he seems to like the track, and I think he could come back here with another top 5 and refined his form after a rough week at Thermal.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot, and Marcus definitely hasn't had the start to the season that he wanted, and did really put on not a great display at Thermal at all, but this is going to be a much different track, and one that I think he can perform well on, so hopefully he can kind of get his season going in the right direction this weekend, because really ever since he moved to Andretti, it hasn't been his best stuff so far.
Yeah, and I think this could be a big weekend for Andretti as a whole. You mentioned Herta as your pick to win the race, and I think it's going to be one of the 2 or 3 favorites, and then Kyle Kirkwood has a nice history on this track as well, as does Ericsson, so I think this could be a massive weekend for them, and is going to be an important weekend for them as far as their whole season goes.
Yeah, two of their 3 guys are former winners here, so yeah, I think it's obviously shows that they have a lot of pace around here, and their drivers do as well, so I think it could be a big weekend for Andretti. And then finally here to wrap up, we'll predict our winner for Formula E returning in Miami. I have Taylor Barnard picking up his first win of his young Formula E career after a great start to the season so far for him. 3 podiums in the first 4 rounds. I think it's been a really solid start to the season. And Barnard has kind of really caught my eye as a guy to watch out for in the years to come, whether it's in Formula E or somewhere else. He's a young driver and seems to have a lot of talent. is not really afraid to take it to anybody, and I like to see that. So I think he's gonna pick up his first win of the season here and his first win of his F1 career.
Yeah, I like that pick. I'm going to go with Antonio Felix da Costa here to get the win. I think Porsche's due for a win, and they've really had kind of a rough start to the year so far. He had a couple nice finishes. Da Costa did back-to-back podiums at the start of his season, but then had a rough weekend in Saudi Arabia, and then his teammate Pascal Wehrlein has certainly not delivered what we expect from him so far this year. So I think this break comes at a good time for them, these last few weeks that we've had off from Formula E, and I think Porsche is due for a little bit of a rebound here, and I think him and Wehrlein are both going to come out strong this weekend, but I'm going to say Da Costa gets the win.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. It feels like Porsche's been due really all season. They've had some good performances, but just haven't crossed that threshold into a win yet. So, I think Porsche's right up there and start the season as well.
Yep, yeah, I think it's going to be a good weekend. I'm excited to see what those cars look like at Homestead, and I think we're going to have some great racing ahead of us. Yeah,
I think it should be some really good action down there and everywhere next week. We've got a really busy weekend. Formula One, NASCAR, IndyCar, and FE, along with IMSA as well this weekend. A lot going on, and should have a lot of stuff to talk about next weekend.
Yeah, I think next weekend might be one of our longer pods ever. We're gonna have a lot to cover. So
yeah, I think so too.
Excited for it.
Yep. Well, that's everything for this week. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yep. See you soon.